Good evening. Welcome to Loveworld USA News. I'm TGK Andre. First, let's take a quick look at the top stories this evening. GOP plan would create Trump Health Freedom accounts and expand state waivers from Obamacare. The Supreme Court to review Trump plan restricting birthright citizenship. The Indiana House approves Trump-backed congressional map, adding 2 GOP-leaning districts. Judge cites new law in order to unseal Epstein, Maxwell grand jury records. And DeSantis outlines phased plan to end property taxes on Florida primary homes by 2026 vote. And now to the news. House Republicans are advancing a proposal that will let states opt out of major provisions of the Affordable Care Act and redirect federal subsidy dollars into new health savings accounts named Trump Health Freedom accounts. The bill, called the More Affordable Care Act and led by Republican Study Committee Chairman Representative August Pfluger of Texas, is set to be introduced Monday. States that obtain waivers under the plan would be required to put in place alternative mechanisms to protect high-risk patients from sharp premium increases. Under the proposal, waiver states can move away from the federal healthcare exchange and either operate their own platforms or authorize privately run exchanges, while still allowing residents to access federal options if they choose. Federal funds that currently go toward ACA premium subsidies in those states would instead be deposited into individual HSA-style accounts for eligible enrollees, giving families direct control over how that support is used. The bill would also allow consumers to purchase health plans across state lines, with programs in waiver states required to be accessible to residents of other waiver states to promote interstate competition. Rather than repealing Obamacare outright, the measure is framed by its sponsors as a way to increase choice and competition in areas where the federal exchange dominates the market. The legislation comes as enhanced ACA subsidies enacted during the COVID-19 pandemic are set to expire, a development that could significantly increase healthcare premiums for millions of Americans if Congress does not act. Many Republicans oppose extending those enhanced subsidies, arguing that they have driven up overall costs without fixing underlying problems in the insurance market, while Democrats and some moderates have called an extension necessary to avoid a steep affordability cliff. House GOP leaders are currently assembling a broader healthcare package that Speaker Mike Johnson has said could come to a vote by the end of the month, though it is not yet clear whether Pfluger's bill will be included. As chair of the Republican Study Committee, Pfluger is expected to play a key advisory role for leadership on conservative healthcare reforms. The House bill serves as a counterpart to legislation already introduced in the Senate by Senator Rick Scott of Florida, which would preserve ACA exchanges and protections for pre-existing conditions while shifting financial support into HSA-style Trump Health Freedom accounts and expanding cross-state plan shopping. The Supreme Court has agreed to hear a challenge to President Donald Trump's effort to narrow birthright citizenship, setting up a major ruling on the scope of the Constitution's 14th Amendment. The case, arising from New Hampshire, will determine whether the administration can move forward with a policy limiting automatic citizenship to children with at least one U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident parent. A decision is expected by the end of June. For more than a century, birthright citizenship has been understood to apply to almost anyone born on U.S. soil, based on the 14th Amendment's language that all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. The Trump administration argues that the clause extends only to children who not only are born in the country, but also bear certain forms of political allegiance, a reading at odds with long-standing interpretations accepted by courts, Congress, and scholars across ideological lines. The executive order, announced on Trump's first day in office, has been blocked by lower courts, which have ruled that the administration's approach conflicts with constitutional text and Supreme Court precedent, including the 1898 decision in United States v. Wong Kim Ark. That ruling held that a man born in San Francisco to Chinese parents was a U.S. citizen. The plaintiffs, represented by the American Civil Liberties Union, include families whose children would be directly affected by the proposed restrictions. The Supreme Court previously intervened in a related procedural dispute, ruling that individual federal judges cannot impose nationwide injunctions. But that decision did not address the core legal question the judges will now take up. The case comes as the court, with its 6-3 conservative majority, faces multiple challenges involving Trump's use of executive power, including pending disputes over tariffs and presidential authority to remove members of federal agencies. Watch this.
The Supreme Court is taking on birthright citizenship. The High Court agreed to take on the case of whether President Trump's executive order to end birthright citizenship violates the Constitution. Under Trump's order, children born to parents who are in the United States illegally or temporarily would not be American citizens. A lower court ruling struck down that order, and it hasn't taken effect anywhere in the country. The Supreme Court is expected to have a ruling by early summer.
The Republican-controlled Indiana House has approved a mid-decade congressional redistricting bill backed by President Donald Trump that would create 2 additional right-leaning U.S. House districts in the state. The map, drawn by a national Republican-aligned group, passed 57-41 along party lines in a chamber where Republicans hold a 70-30 majority. The move comes one day after the U.S. Supreme Court allowed Texas to use a new GOP-drawn map that adds multiple Republican-leaning seats and is part of a wider effort by Trump and national Republicans to bolster their narrow House majority ahead of the 2026 midterm elections. Democrats in the Indiana House sharply criticized the plan as partisan gerrymandering designed to marginalize their voters. Assistant Democratic Floor Leader Matt Pierce argued Republicans were effectively trying to erase Democratic representation in Congress, while Representative Sue Arrington said the measure signaled that voters don't matter. At a single public hearing earlier in the week, the bill's sponsor acknowledged the map was politically gerrymandered and drawn purely for political performance to favor Republicans. GOP Representative Ben Smaltz defended the map against accusations of racial gerrymandering, noting that while racial gerrymandering is illegal, federal law does not prohibit maps drawn for partisan advantage. The measure now heads to the Indiana Senate, where its fate is less certain. Republican Senate Leader Roderick Bray has reportedly said that there has not been enough support in his chamber to move forward with mid-cycle redistricting, despite sustained pressure from Trump and his allies. The president has publicly warned Bray and other reluctant Republican lawmakers that they could face primary challengers if they block the map, and has urged Indiana Governor Mike Braun to work aggressively to secure passage. Braun has said that he supports fair maps that help advance the president's agenda in Congress. Indiana's fight is one piece of a broader national redistricting battle. Texas, Missouri, North Carolina, and Ohio have already adopted new GOP-leaning maps, and Republican-led Florida and Kansas are considering changes of their own. Democrats are responding with their own efforts in blue and purple states. California voters approved Proposition 50 to shift map drawing authority back to the Democratic-controlled legislature, a move expected to produce several more Democratic-leaning seats, while Illinois, Maryland, and Virginia are also weighing adjustments. In Utah, a state judge recently rejected a Republican-drawn map and approved an alternative expected to create a Democratic-leaning district before 2026. Let's take a look.
Republican lawmakers feeling the pressure from the White House to redraw district maps to benefit Republicans, a process that usually happens following a census. House Republicans acknowledged they were taking an unprecedented step, but said many Democrat-led states had done it in the past. Today, the Indiana House debated for hours over the issue. Democrat Representative Robin Shackelford asked the map sponsor about where this new map came from.
The Republicans used a third party to obtain the data for the maps. Which company was that, and was it a nonpartisan company?
The organization was the National Republican Redistricting Trust.
Okay, so then I'm assuming it was not nonpartisan.
I think that would be a correct assumption.
In 2021, before the current map was adopted, Indiana lawmakers held public hearings in all 9 districts before it was passed. Lawmakers held a public comment session in the House chambers. Out of 43 people, 41 were against the redistricting. The new map now goes to the Senate for a vote.
A federal judge in Florida has granted a Justice Department request to unseal grand jury transcripts related to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell, relying on a new federal transparency law to override traditional secrecy rules. Judge Rodney Smith ruled that the Epstein Files Transparency Act of 2025, signed by President Donald Trump on November 19th, supersedes the normal confidentiality protections governing federal grand jury materials in this case. The law directs the Attorney General to release all unclassified DOJ records connected to Epstein and Maxwell. Smith's order does not immediately make the grand jury records public, but authorizes the Justice Department to move forward with their release. Under the statute, the department must publish the unclassified material within 30 days, leaving it to DOJ officials to determine the method and exact timing of disclosure. Similar requests to unseal grand jury material in Epstein and Maxwell cases in New York remain pending before other federal judges. The grand jury transcription-related material at issue in Florida and New York were used to bring the original federal sex trafficking charges connected to Epstein's abuse of underage girls and Maxwell's role in those offenses. Officials say these records represent only a small portion of the broader set of files tied to the investigations and prosecutions. Earlier efforts to obtain the same grand jury material were rejected by courts and cited long-standing secrecy rules and privacy concerns. Those prior rulings by judges in Florida and New York concluded that releasing the transcripts will conflict with federal grand jury procedures and were unlikely to produce new evidence beyond what is already known. The passage of the Epstein Files Transparency Act has now changed the legal framework in Florida, prompting Smith's decision to allow unsealing under the new statutory mandate while leaving the details of implementation to the Justice Department. Watch this.
The court ruled a new federal transparency law overrides decades-old secrecy protections. U.S. District Judge Rodney Smith held that the Epstein Transparency Act of 2025, signed by President Donald Trump on November 19th, supersedes the confidentiality rules governing federal grand juries. The statute requires the Attorney General to publish all unclassified DOJ records connected to Epstein and Maxwell within 30 days. The ruling does not immediately release the transcripts, leaving it to the DOJ to determine the timing and method of publication. Smith's decision stands in contrast to prior federal rulings in both Florida and New York, where judges repeatedly denied similar requests. Those judges also suggested the sealed material was unlikely to contain new evidence beyond what was already public. The transcripts represent only a sliver of the broad cache of investigative records covered by the transparency mandate.
The news will be back after this break. Don't go anywhere.
In a world that's always moving, staying connected to the right resources makes all the difference. Welcome to the Loveworld App Store, the digital home of everything that powers your journey in the Loveworld nation. Here, discovery is simple and meaningful. With our categories section, you can explore a wide range of apps designed to enrich your spirit.
I'm praying especially for you. You that have been sick. You need a miracle.
On the Loveworld App Store, you can access all your favorite apps, such as Healing School app, King's Chat, PCDL, Rhapsody app, Love Tunes, ESPYs, Loveworld Worship, Herald app, Alpha TV, King's View, C-Flix, Hello Loveworld, PCDL for Kids, King's Conference, and so much more. Each application is created to serve a unique purpose and bring you closer to a life of impact. Explore My App feature, where your most valued tools are gathered in one convenient place. It's your personalized hub, ready whenever you are. The Loveworld App Store is more than a collection of apps. It's a vibrant ecosystem built to inspire faith, foster connection, and equip you for impact. Visit www.lwappstore.com to download the app on your device. Explore a world where purpose meets technology. Loveworld App Store. All your world in one place.
Welcome back. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis is backing a phased plan to completely eliminate property taxes on primary residences, saying the proposal will go before voters on the 2026 ballot and require 60% approval to take effect. DeSantis argued that while the state's finances are sound, local property taxes have climbed sharply and are hurting people, blaming what he called overspending by local governments. Lawmakers in the Florida House are advancing a package that includes a substantial increase in the homestead exemption to $500,000, with a possible cap of $1 million for seniors, tighter limits on assessment increases, and an option to eliminate property taxes on homesteaded properties altogether. DeSantis said the change will make Florida the first state to abolish property taxes on primary residences while also having no state income tax. He suggested the plan may be needed to be implemented gradually, emphasizing that he wants a structure that both works fiscally and can win voter support. Policy analysts know that property taxes generate roughly $55 billion a year and are a key revenue source for counties, cities, and especially school districts, in some cases providing up to 60% of their funding. The Florida Policy Institute has warned that ending property taxes could force sharp increases in other taxes, including estimates that the state sales tax might need to rise from 6% to as high as 12% to fully replace the revenue. DeSantis has vetoed a proposed study of local property tax usage and impacts, and instead points to growth in local tax collection since 2019 as evidence that governments have room to adjust and that the state's rainy day reserves can be strengthened. The governor also highlighted that a large share of property tax revenue comes from non-residents with second homes and from commercial properties, estimating that homesteaded primary residences account for roughly 30% of total property tax collections. Citing the rapid run-up in home values during the pandemic-era migration boom, he questioned whether it is fair for homeowners to see assessments and tax bills jump dramatically in just a few years. DeSantis argued that the current system allows budgets to grow 50 to 60% over a short period, and said the proposed reforms are intended to give long-term residents relief while maintaining a stable tax base through a carefully staged transition. Netflix has agreed to buy Warner Brothers and Discovery in a cash and stock transaction, valuing the company at $72 billion, the streaming giant announced Friday. Under the deal, Netflix will acquire Warner Brothers Discovery's film and television studios, as well as the HBO Max streaming platform, bringing franchises such as Game of Thrones, The Sopranos, The Big Bang Theory, and the DC Universe and classic titles like The Wizard of Oz under Netflix's control. The offer is valued at $27.75 per Warner Brothers Discovery share, implying an enterprise value of about $82.7 billion, including debt. The transaction is expected to close after Warner Brothers Discovery completes a planned separation of its streaming and studios business and its global networks division into two publicly traded companies, a process anticipated in the second half of 2026. Netflix co-CEO Greg Peters said the acquisition would strengthen the company's content slate and long-term growth, calling Warner Brothers a defining force in entertainment for more than a century. Netflix said the deal would expand its U.S. production capacity, support increased investment in original programming, and preserve Warner Brothers' current practice of releasing films in theaters. Warner Brothers Discovery CEO David Zaslav said the agreement would help ensure that the company's portfolio of franchises and library titles continue to reach audiences around the world. The deal marks a major consolidation in the media and streaming sector and is the largest announced merger of the year, reinforcing Netflix's position as a dominant global distribution platform. Other players, including Paramount and Skydance, reportedly pursued competing offers for some or all of Warner Brothers' assets, with Paramount's leadership criticizing what it described as an uneven sales process. Investors in both companies are watching closely, with Netflix and Warner Brothers Discovery widely held across multiple exchange-traded funds. The proposed merger is expected to draw scrutiny from regulators and lawmakers concerned about market concentration in content and distribution. Senator Roger Marshall from Kansas has already urged the Justice Department and Federal Trade Commission to examine the combination, arguing that the deal could create one of the largest content consolidations in modern media and potentially harm consumers, workers, and competition. Netflix and Warner Brothers Discovery will need regulatory approval in the United States and potentially in other jurisdictions before the transaction can be completed. Let's take a look.
Netflix has agreed to buy Warner Brothers Discovery's TV, film studios and streaming division for $72 billion to give control of one of Hollywood's most prized and oldest assets to the streaming pioneer. It follows a weeks-long bidding war in which Netflix offered nearly $28 a share. That beat Paramount Skydance's close to $24 bid for the whole of Warner Brothers Discovery, including the cable TV assets slated for a spin-off. Buying the owner of franchises including Harry Potter, Game of Thrones and DC Comics will further push the balance of power in Hollywood in favour of Netflix and help the streaming giant as it competes with Walt Disney and the Ellison family-led Paramount. The deal is likely to face strong antitrust scrutiny in Europe and the US, though, as it would give the world's biggest streaming service ownership of a rival that is home to HBO Max and has nearly 130 million streaming subscribers. Paramount kicked off the bidding war with a series of unsolicited offers. It has close ties with the Trump administration. It questioned the sale process earlier this week and alleged favourable treatment to Netflix. Even before the bids were in, some members of Congress said a Netflix-Warner Brothers Discovery deal could harm consumers and Hollywood.
The U.S. Treasury Department has fined New York-based Gracetown Incorporated $7.1 million for violating sanctions by managing luxury real estate linked to Russian businessman Oleg Deripaska, a sanctioned ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin. Treasury's Office of Foreign Assets Control said Gracetown received 24 payments totaling $31,250 between April 2018 and May 2020 for managing properties owned through a company tied to Deripaska, despite being notified that dealings involving him were prohibited under U.S. sanctions. According to prior Justice Department filings, Gracetown has been linked to UK businessman Graham Bonham Carter, who was arrested in 2022 and charged with conspiring to violate U.S. sanctions and committing wire fraud related to funding Deripaska's U.S. properties and attempting to move his artwork to New York. Deripaska himself has faced U.S. economic sanctions since 2018, when the Treasury designated him for acting on behalf of a senior Russian official and operating in Russia's energy sector, resulting in the blocking of his U.S. jurisdiction assets and a ban on U.S. persons doing business with him or his interests. Deripaska has been the subject of multiple high-profile legal actions in the United States. In 2017, he sued the Associated Press over an article about his business dealings with former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort. A federal judge dismissed defamation and libel claims later that year. In 2022, U.S. prosecutors in New York charged Deripaska and 3 associates with conspiring to evade sanctions and with efforts to ensure that his child would be born in the United States. Treasury officials said the enforcement action against Gracetown underscores the expectation that companies follow OFAC guidance when dealing with sanctioned individuals and entities. In a statement, Treasury Undersecretary for Terrorism and Financial Intelligence, John K. Hurley, said the department will continue to investigate and hold accountable those who enable sanctioned actors. Gracetown, founded in 2006, was created to manage 3 high-end properties in New York and Washington, D.C. that Deripaska acquired around that time through various legal structures. The news continues after this break. Stay with us.
It's easy to set up, quick to start, and packed with value. Smarter streaming starts here with the Alpha TV Stick. Just plug and stream anytime, anywhere. Discover a curated lineup of content designed to inspire, live broadcasts and global events, inspirational films and series, children's programming, healing and teaching sessions, all on demand. With millions of downloads worldwide, the Alpha TV app is transforming lives across the globe. And now, we're on a mission to reach 1 billion downloads of the Alpha TV app, and you can be part of it. Join the global wave with 1 billion Alpha TV app downloads worldwide. Bring the higher life into every home. Order your Alpha TV Stick today and experience smarter streaming. Alpha, the higher life is here.
Welcome back. New Zealand police say they have recovered a limited edition Fabergé pendant 6 days after the man accused of stealing it allegedly swallowed the jewelry inside an Auckland store. Officers said the pendant was retrieved Thursday night after it exited the suspect's gastrointestinal tract on its own, without the need for medical intervention. The 32-year-old man was arrested at Partridge Jewelers on November 28th and has remained in police custody since appearing in court the following day, when he did not enter a plea to a theft charge. Police said officers monitored him around the clock while waiting for the item to appear, describing the surveillance as part of their duty of care while the suspect was in custody. The pendant, valued at 33,000 New Zealand dollars, about 19,000 US dollars, is one of only 50 pieces inspired by the 1983 James Bond film Octopussy. The design features a gold egg painted with green enamel and set with diamonds and sapphires. According to the jeweler, the piece opens to reveal an 18-karat yellow gold octopus decorated with white diamond suckers and black diamond eyes. Police released a photograph showing the recovered pendant and its gold chain with the price tag still attached. The suspect, whose name has not been made public, is due back in Auckland District Court on Monday and will remain in custody until then. Let's take a look.
Well, they say a picture is worth 1,000 words, and this image tells a very interesting story. Police in New Zealand recovered a stolen Fabergé egg pendant after a 6-day wait. The reason for the delay, the thief swallowed the pendant, and it took that long for nature to run its course. The man originally pled not guilty after his arrest because of the lack of evidence. The egg was only one of 50 in the world and worth about 20 grand.
Germany's parliament has voted to introduce a new voluntary military service scheme for 18-year-olds as part of a broader push to strengthen national defense following Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Under the plan, starting in January 2026, all 18-year-olds will receive a questionnaire asking if they are willing to serve in the armed forces. Completing the form will be mandatory for men and voluntary for women. The Bundestag approved the measure by a vote of 323 to 272, aligning Germany with other European countries that are reintroducing or expanding forms of national service. The government says the program is intended to help rebuild the Bundeswehr into Europe's strongest conventional army, in line with Chancellor Friedrich Merz's commitments and NATO force targets. Germany's armed forces currently number around 182,000 personnel, and Defense Minister Boris Pistorius wants to add 20,000 within a year and reach 260,000 in the early 2030s, supported by roughly 200,000 reservists. From July 2027, all 18-year-old men will also undergo a medical examination to determine fitness for potential service so that, in the event of a crisis, authorities can quickly identify those who are able to serve. The move has prompted significant opposition among young people. Student groups have organized school strikes in dozens of cities, arguing they do not want to spend months in barracks or contribute to what they describe as a war machine. A small demonstration outside the Bundestag coincided with the vote, while school leaders in some areas warned parents against taking children out of lessons to join protests. The government has emphasized the service will remain voluntary as long as security conditions allow, but has left open the possibility of compulsory service if too few volunteers come forward or threat environment worsens. Financial incentives are being used to encourage participation, with volunteers offered a monthly salary of around £2,600, higher than comparable plans in countries such as France, which recently announced a 10-month voluntary military program paying at least €800 a month. German officials argue that years of cutting troop numbers after the Cold War and relying on a smaller professional force are no longer sufficient given current security pressures and ongoing calls from the United States for European NATO members to increase defense spending. Watch this.
When Germany suspended mandatory military service in 2011, that is not back for now, but under the new law, all men aged 18 and above will go through mandatory medical assessments, and both men and women above the age of 18 will be asked to declare their willingness to serve. Now, Germany is trying to increase its total military strength to 460,000 soldiers. This will include 260,000 active full-time duty soldiers and 200,000 reservists. Now, these are NATO targets, and Germany's current military strength is far from the target figure.
Just before we end the news, let's take a quick look at tomorrow's weather forecast. And to end the news today, a quick recap of the headlines. The GOP plan would create Trump Health Freedom accounts and expand stay waivers from Obamacare. The Supreme Court's reviewed Trump's plan restricting birthright citizenship. The Indiana House approves Trump-backed congressional map adding 2 GOP-leaning districts. A judge cites new law in order to unseal Epstein and Maxwell grand jury records. And DeSantis outlines phased plan to end property taxes on Florida primary homes by 2026 vote. And that's the news for today. Join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. Central Time for News Plus. I'm TGK Andre. Good night and God bless you.